deep sea is a place where time doesn't pass the same way. Down there, the world has no sound, but it has memory. And there's a shipwreck that became a legend because it isn't just a lost ship. It's an entire story locked inside a vault of salt water. A vault so valuable and so explosive that it became a state secret. You may have heard it called the greatest treasure in human history, but the truth is darker. What's on the ocean floor isn't just gold. It's conflict, it's politics, it's historical shame, and it's power. Today, we're going to talk about the holy grail of shipwrecks, the San José, and why no one can officially say where it is.
The San José was one of the great galleons of the Spanish colonial system, a time when the ocean was a highway and also a battlefield. In 1708, in the context of the War of the Spanish Succession, the ship sailed through the Caribbean, carrying wealth meant to finance a European conflict. According to historical accounts and modern reconstructions, it was transporting a cargo of enormous value, gold, silver, and other colonial goods, making it an obvious target. The most repeated version of the story is simple: an British attack, a battle, an explosion, and the ship vanishes within minutes. But the sea doesn't swallow only wood and metal. It swallows documents. It erases evidence. And when empires are involved, it erases guilt. The result is that for more than 300 years, the San José became an obsession for historians, for archaeologists, and for treasure hunters. They call this shipwreck the billionaire one. But that number isn't a neutral label, it's a trigger. Some estimates, cited in reports, suggest the cargo may have reached something like 7 to 12 million pesos of the time, and there are mentions of tons of gold, along with silver and gemstones. But how much it's worth depends on how you calculate it, and on what you're trying to prove. Because the word treasure works like a spell. It turns history into a prize, and it turns heritage into a dispute. And that's where the first dark dilemma of this documentary is born. If the past has a price, who pays and who gets paid? In November 2015, Colombian authorities announced the discovery of the shipwreck, and from that point on, almost everything turned to fog. The ship lies at around 600 meters deep, far too deep for ordinary human diving, and deep enough to require robots, sensors, and advanced technology. And the detail that bothers people the most, the exact coordinates are treated as classified. It's not only to prevent looting, it's also because when the world knows where a treasure is, a race begins. And every treasure race has one inevitable side: people willing to do anything to get there first. In this case, the sea became a vault, and the state became the lock. The Colombian government began framing the San José as cultural heritage and part of the country's historical identity. In an official document, Colombia's Maritime Authority describes scientific and verification campaigns at the site, with interdisciplinary teams, the use of sensors and remotely operated vehicles, as well as non-intrusive techniques and photogrammetry to document the archaeological context. This point matters. The official line is research, not exploitation. And here comes a sentence that changes everything. When a treasure becomes a cultural asset, it stops being something someone can simply take. But the line between science and extraction is thin, and with the San José, that line has always been political. Because what's down there isn't just about old coins, it's about proving a narrative, the narrative of who has the authority to define what the shipwreck is and what should be done with it.
And then, in November 2025, came the announcement the world had been waiting years for. Colombian scientists recovered some of the first objects from the site. Among them, a cannon, 3 coins, and a porcelain cup, according to a statement released by authorities and reported by the international press. It sounds like almost nothing, just 5 things. But in a case like this, 5 things can be a bomb. Because every object brought up isn't just an archaeological artifact, it can become proof of the wreck's identity, proof of provenance, and a legal argument. On top of that, reports pointed out that this recovery is part of a scientific investigation, including efforts to better understand what caused the sinking, without reducing everything to the idea of treasure. In other words, Columbia went down to the seafloor and brought an entire dispute back to the surface.
When a shipwreck like this is found, owners appear, people you've never seen before. There are disputes and claims involving a U.S. salvage company, Sea Search Armada, which says it identified the site decades earlier and is seeking recognition and compensation. And there's also the historical debate involving Spain around state ships, sovereignty, and heritage, an issue that keeps resurfacing in public discussions about the wreck. This is where the documentary gets darker, because you realize the treasure isn't lost, it's being guarded, and that's exactly why it's worth so much. It's not just about gold, it's about who's in control.
There's an international principle often cited when it comes to submerged heritage, the idea that underwater cultural heritage should not be commercially exploited. That appears explicitly in UNESCO's Convention on the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage, which includes the concept of no commercial exploitation and the protection of historical legacy. In practice, it runs into an old enemy, the market. Because for many people, the seafloor is the last ownerless frontier, and when someone finds gold, there will always be someone who says, "This is an opportunity." But heritage isn't an opportunity. Heritage is memory, and when memory is sold, it stops teaching.
On the seafloor, gold is silent. But on the surface, it screams. It calls governments. It calls lawyers. It calls companies. It calls national pride. And in the middle of all that, you realize something. This shipwreck isn't the Holy Grail because there are billions down there. It's the Holy Grail because it forces the world to choose. Do we preserve the past, or do we sell the past? Because historical tragedies and crimes don't end when a ship goes down. Sometimes they only begin to be fought over the moment someone finds the coordinates. And as long as the location of the San José remains secret, one final question keeps floating above the water. What's more dangerous, a lost treasure or a found treasure?